I call the member for Wright.
And I thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to stand on the Mineral Resource Rent Appeals and Other Measures Bills 2013, and just listening to the previous speaker, I'm glad I am. The comment that the resources belong to all Australians, I think there's a couple of little imaginary lines drawn on the map of Australia. We call those places states. I think they have an inherent right to call those resources their own. We could get a challenge through the courts for a determination on who they really are owned by. But the whole principle of the state royalties provisions, state royalty provisions provide that the ownership of those states sit with the states. But never, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story. Come into this place and spoke about how proud they were of a mineral resource rent tax. How proud they were of them. Now, I just wanted to find how proud are you of which version? Because I've been here for the last and I saw 5 versions of that tax. There was more starts on that tax than Farlap. Dead set. I can only make a sweeping assumption that the last version is the one that you settled on. Now, it was like most pieces of legislation brought before this government last time. It was some thought bubble brought up on the back of, heaven forbid, someone making a profit. Because on the other side of the house, you will always have those socialists who make the point that profit is a dirty word. Profit is a dirty word, and anyone that makes a profit must be evil. Must be evil. Later on during my speech, I'll make particular note of the comparison tax rates of our mining sector here in Australia, the sovereign risk issues, and then how we compare with other mining investments right around the world, because we need to be competitive as a nation. I mean, I don't believe for one moment that the member who spoke before, the member for Charlton, when he spoke about that he'd been into a small business and they were devastated that they had lost their tax benefit. Did you manage to bring up the bit about the superannuation with them, because it is small business that actually paid the increase? When this bill was brought before the House and the government was spruiking about the increase in the superannuation, and all economic theorists agree, all agree that superannuation does need to go up. Absolutely, the cost of living pressures, it does need to go up. But it needs to go up in a way which is sustainable. It needs to go up. It is no good speaking to someone unemployed in the streets, because this is where it will get to. Speaking to someone unemployed in the streets and saying, mate, what do you do for a living? He said, I'm unemployed. But I tell you what, if I was working, I'd get 12%. Better to have a job, be picking up your 9%, let your business grow for a couple of years, and we, as the true Conservative government, the true party of small business, will come to the rescue of business and save them. Save them, as only we can, and only the history books tell us that we do. Want to have a chat about Norway? Now, Norway is quite a peculiar country where they've got a number of oil reserves, and they've been putting away reserves similar to what we had in the future fund. We thought what Norway was doing, on the back of your comments, was not a bad idea, so we started to do that as well. We called it a future fund. Labor government got into power and spent the money. So if it's a future fund for the future and you want to aspirate for the benefits of Norway's economic credibility, one needs to remember that we had a future fund that was quickly depleted when Labor got to government. You spoke about billionaires. Yeah, I know billionaires. They're good people. As on the other side, you guys know union members. You know union bosses. You know the Eddie O'Beebs, and you know those HSU bosses. You know those guys. So do not come in here and propagate that someone having a relationship with a billionaire is a bad place to be, and that everything that is done on the other side of the chamber is good and righteous. The MRRT damaged international investor confidence in Australia and has damaged the mining industry, and subsequently has had an impact on our nation's economy. The lead-in time for mining investment is about 5 years. So by the time they do their first geo inspections, get all their pre-approvals in place from state and federal, the effects of this tax we're not going to see for another couple of years. We're not going to see the financial impacts we're seeing straight away, because we were supposed to have a bucket load of money, the numbers which I'll run through later on, a bucket load of money that was to be generated out of this tax, but that never happened. That never happened. Counting numbers is not the Labor Party of Australia's strength. Nearly every line item or portfolio that these guys have previously presided over have been absolutely diabolical. Absolute diabolical. The MRT has proved a monumental failure when it comes to raising in half the forecasted revenue which the previous government had already spent. And that's the clanger. That's the clanger. No one would expect a business, a small business, a medium-sized business in Australia to operate under the conditions and the mantra of what our previous government set this up. Fair enough. If this government would have said, this is the revenue, we'll wait till it comes in and then we'll invest that into our nation. But no, there was an election cycle on, there was the left and the right at each other's throat. It was like coming to work each day and working out, well, I wonder who Labor are going to have as their Prime Minister this week. Who are they going to have as their their immigration minister? Who are they going to have as their small business minister? It was like a turnstile of revolving personalities in this parliament, and as a result of them not being able to get their act together, Australia was the lesser for it. Australia as a nation was the lesser for it. Comments were made in this House later on that the Australian people have spoken overwhelmingly. We now have what we consider a legitimate mandate. One only needs to have a look at the chairs in this parliament. For the benefit of Hansard, the chamber we stand in is a U-shaped horseshoe. The coalition numbers consume over half, whilst on the other side, by just opposed, on the other side, outside the front bench, the Australian Labor Party is flat out getting to the first aisle on the other side. Now, what significance is that for Australia? It just means that each block of 90,000 population, each member who has been sent here has done so with a majority from their electorate. So, not that the Australian Labor Party is great at listening to the Australian people. One only needs to go back and have a look at the election of their leader, where one gets 18,000, the other one gets 12,000, the bloke who gets 12,000 wins. So it's not as if they've got a great track record on having an acute ear to the Australian public. But nevertheless, all that aside, the mining sector is cyclical. And we spoke about the lead-in time, we spoke about the 5 years that it takes, and sometimes longer. We've got coal interests in Queensland which are trying to get up at the moment. They're going to be closer to 8 and in some instances 10. Where at the other, and talking about the lead-in times, the coal reserves that one particular lease in Queensland is looking at has the capacity to generate out of the Galilee Basin the equal amount of coal completely generated by the Bowen Basin at the moment. So that's the next wave of resources sector that has the capacity to come on. In comparison, in Mongolia, there are Australian companies up there who have chosen, under the political climate set by the previous government, not to invest into the future of the Australian coal sector, but to take their investment because it was seen to be less of a risk to go to Mongolia. A lesser risk to go to Mongolia and invest over there. Their production costs are nearly half ours. Their transport costs are half. They're landing on the Chinese border for around $80 a tonne. How do we compete with that by saying, as a government, having our hand in the companies, the mining companies' pockets? The MRR is bad for investment and one of our most important industries. Arguably, this is the worst time that one should be looking to stick on an additional tax. What's the there was a comment made by the previous speaker about, what's the problem of having a tax if no one's paying it? Just let it sit there if no one's paying it. Well, in theory, that's probably not something that needs to be challenged. The problem is fundamentally that the money that was supposed to be generated, you've gone and spent it. Now, you spoke about the School Kids bonus and how atrocious it is that we're taking the School Kids bonus away. All you have done, no, not through you, Speaker, and I don't impugn the chair, all the Australian Labor Party have done when they talk about the school kids bonus and how we've got to look after this generation, all this government has done through this tax has shackled our next generation of children to debt. Shackled our generation of kids. Now, just to put it into perspective of when this debt's going to be paid down, the current debt ceiling is $300 billion. Current debt ceiling is $300 billion. We're going to have a look at trying to increase that. $300 billion. If we went back into the history of the Australian surpluses on both sides of the House, took the best one, $18 billion, I took the best, the highest surplus we've ever had, it would take us, a coalition, if we could emulate that, the best surplus Australia has ever had, given that the economies of the world are very cyclical, we would have to emulate that record surplus for 18 consecutive years to pay down the $300 billion worth of debt. That's what we'd have to do. Talk about school kids bonus, talk about looking after the future, the next generation. The best way we can look after the next generation is don't stop shackling them to debt. If it's good debt, investment in ports that create revenue, if it's good debt that builds hospitals, so be it, but not debt that has been wasted and squandered. Mining is one of the biggest contributors to the Australian economy, and the tax has translated to fewer jobs in engineering, retailing, finance, accommodation, travel, and in fact every sector of the business. I don't have any mining in my area. I'm on the Gold Coast hinterland. I go up to the top of the Toowoomba Range, predominantly agricultural, tourism sector. So even though I don't have mining in my sector, things are tough, and as a result I have fitters, truck drivers, mining engineers, mining bosses that choose to live in my electorate and fly in and fly out. The amount of people are coming to me of late, raising concern about the future of the industry is concerning because they no longer have jobs. They no longer have jobs. Now, is that completely contributable to the MRRT? It would be irresponsible for me to link those two together. However, with the Chinese economy softening, coming off their boil, the Australian dollar having an impact or taking away our competitive strength in the global market once we hit parity, other leaders have an impact on why the industry has retarded. Has the mining tax contributed to providing confidence in the sector? Most definitely it has not. Most definitely the mining tax has had a negative confidence effect on investors in this sector. Evidence of that is the amount of new investment coming into the sector. Evidence of that is the amount of current investment now leaving Australia, going offshore. Ratings agencies out of London are now saying that it's, you can buy money to go in and do invest in a coal mine cheaper outside of Australia than you can in, and they're citing because of the sovereign risk issues. As a government, we should be hanging our head in shame. I've got figures here which pertain to the forecast revenues that this bill was supposed to bring: 26 billion, 11 billion, then downgraded to 10.6 billion, downgraded again in the 2013 MyEFO budgets to 9.1. Finally, in 2013, in the PFO documents, down to 4.4 billion, generating only 400 million. Disgrace. I keep on bringing it to the fore when it comes to economic credibility. This government has showed this previous government has showed time and time again that it could not hit the barn, the side of a barn with a forecast, continually out in nearly every facet by roughly around $20 billion. However, it gets worse. The previous government committed the cardinal sin again in spending the money before they earn it. Small businesses can't afford to do that. If they do it, they put it on an overdraft, it becomes an expense. In the same terms, what we have now is an enormous amount of debt, money that's been spent, that's going to be shackled to our next generation. If we want to look after our future generations, we need to make sure that they've got a job. We need to make sure that cost of living pressures are low. We need to make sure that they've got great education opportunities. And as a coalition and as a Liberal Party member, I accept the mandate that we have to pursue the repeal of this ridiculous mineral resource rent tax